Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video. This is definitely going to be a bit of a different one. I'm actually interviewing for the first time ever, so this is my first interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. It's with Dr. Hamid Kamali. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's basically a doctor who works for MEDICHECKS, who I've recently started working with. I basically got a blood test done, so I got a full male hormone test, I believe. You'll see in a minute anyway. But I'm basically reached out to him. I was like, can we do it like a bit of an interview? I thought it'd be useful for you guys to kind of get a bit more of an insight into like all the results, because obviously it's not something that I specialize in. My thing is coaching with nutrition and training. This is more like kind of through the health aspect of things, so it's kind of blood is the medical side. It's not something that I'm particularly knowledgeable in as it stands. So I wanted to get someone in who could give you a really full, in-depth, detailed kind of analysis of this, and obviously make sure that it was kind of 100% correct, because the last thing that I want to do is give you guys incorrect information. So without any further ado, I'm going to go into the interview now. We actually spoke a little bit beforehand, but as it's my first interview, I didn't really introduce him when we started recording, because I've already been speaking to him for like half an hour. But yeah, anyway, we'll get into the interview. He basically goes through a lot, which is really, really interesting. I'm going to split this video as well into two separate videos, just because we were speaking for well over an hour. So this part is going to go through my blood tests and basically what they showed. Okay, so start off by welcoming you to the YouTube channel.
Okay.
Appreciate you coming on.
Oh, well, thanks very much for having me.
And then did you want to start off by going through, obviously, the results and stuff from it?
Okay, yeah. So I've got your results here. So overall, they're very good, very healthy. Were you pleased with them, or was there anything? I mean, there are a couple of slight abnormalities. How did you feel about it when you got your results back?
Yeah, I mean, generally, I was generally, happy with them. I think I had a look through them, and I had a rough idea anyway of obviously, kind of what to look out for.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was pretty pleased. There was a few little things on there which I was, I wasn't concerned about, but I was like interested in obviously, asking you a bit more about them.
Yeah.
I think from obviously like coming from like a bodybuilding side of things anyway, kind of putting my body under a lot of stress. I can see like a few of them, and I obviously watched a few videos and obviously looked a bit into it before, and seen that obviously a few of them would be affected because of that anyway. Generally. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So can I ask so where are you at the moment in terms of your bodybuilding? Are you have you got a show coming up or?
No, so basically the last time I competed was last October.
Okay.
So October 2018.
Yeah.
And then since then, obviously, I've gone into kind of like a fairly long off season. So yeah, obviously it's good, probably like 8-9 months since then.
Yeah.
Obviously, shoveling in food and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
And now I've got to the point where I've kind of started to taper it back a little bit. I'm actually starting like a kind of little 12-week cut going into the summer.
Okay. Well, so at what point were these blood tests taken? Was it before your cut or after you started cutting?
No, it was like the very end. It was kind of like the last day of my like off season.
Okay.
So yeah, one of the last days. Yeah. So obviously my calories are like super high. Food is quite high, feed and all that sort of stuff. So I thought it would be a good time to kind of get them done, because it's probably like the unhealthiest that I've been in a fair while.
Okay, well, considering it was your unhealthiest, they're pretty good. Right, so we can actually tell a lot about, although these are just numbers, we can really tell quite a lot about your health from these markers. So if we start at the top, we've got the hemoglobin. That's the concentration. Okay, so hemoglobin is the oxygen carrying part of your red blood cell. And so it's obviously really important, oxygen being vital to all the tissues. So when you talk about anemia, we're talking about a low hemoglobin. Now, one of the things that happens, and you see it very commonly in people who use anabolic steroids, is that the hemoglobin is high, because to varying degrees, all anabolic steroids cause increased erythropoiesis, so formation of red blood cells, which is one of the dangers of using steroids, is that as you increase the hemoglobin concentration and you increase the second marker there, the hematocrit, which is the concentration of your blood, which is made up of red blood cells, the blood becomes thicker. And although you've got more hemoglobin to transport oxygen at that point, the blood is also thicker, so the flow is less good. You can imagine a thick fluid doesn't flow as well as a less viscous fluid. So yours are all green, lovely and normal. Okay. Now your hemoglobin of 166, that's very healthy. Okay. So, more isn't more. Okay. You've got a very healthy amount, and for a natural athlete, that's what I would expect to see, especially for a male. Okay.
Okay.
But
Good.
then when we look further down, we can see these markers here: MCV, MCH, MCHC. Okay. These are, although they're numbers, they can almost help us visualize what your red blood cells are like.
Okay.
So when I look at yours, I can see that your red blood cells are normal.
Right.
Yeah, so they're normal in volume, and that's really important because changes in the MCV can give us clues about if there's any deficiencies. So although it's really important to get your iron and your B12 and your folate checked,
Yeah.
a full blood count on its own actually can give you a lot of information. So we can see from this that an MCV of towards 80 would indicate that you're low on iron. As that's one of the common causes. There are other causes, of course. And then higher towards 100 would say, or maybe you're low on B12 or folate. So you're right in the middle of between 80 and 100. So
Okay. Good.
spot
Good.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely.
interesting to know as well that you can obviously tell all that just from
Yeah, oh yeah,
red
yeah,
blood.
and we can even this marker here, RDW, red cell distribution width, and that tells us the range of sizes and volumes of your red blood cell, and 13.4 is perfectly normal, so really healthy. And then we look at your white cell count. So ordinarily we would just look at your total white cell count at the top, and white cells are really interesting actually because although they are raised in infection, they can also be low in infection, but they also can tell us if there is any underlying chronic inflammation, even if they're within the normal range. So we know that people who smoke, for example, can
Yeah.
have higher levels of white cells, even though they're in the normal range, if that makes sense, because they've got a
Right.
sort of
Okay.
background inflammation. Yours are all very healthy. Okay, so I would say that this is a picture of low inflammation. Um, and then next we look at the clotting cells. And again, we're looking here at the volume of your platelets, and platelets are the cells which initially will go to the site of if there's any sort of damage to the blood vessel, they'll go to that site and they will help patch it up. Okay, so yours are perfectly normal count, that can be raised again in inflammation. So very healthy, Jake, as we expected.
Okay.
Now we've moved on to your kidneys here. Now, what did you in? Do you?
Red
I'm really
one.
sorry. Yeah, there's a red one here now. So what we've got at the top here is we've got your level of urea. So urea is something which is excreted by your kidney. So, but it's also a breakdown product of red blood cells. But if this is raised, it can indicate problems with filtration of the kidney. It could indicate problems with increased red blood cell breakdown, or it could indicate, a number of other potential issues. Dehydration is a common cause for that being slightly raised, but again, yours is very normal. Now, looking at your creatinine, so I gather you looked into this a little bit. Do you have any
Yeah.
understanding?
Yeah. I've looked into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you think? Are you concerned about that, or?
No, I wish I wasn't. I think it's from what I looked into it is like if you
Yeah.
like supplement creatine and stuff like that, or have like a high protein diet, that generally it's
Yeah.
going to be kind of on the higher end of things. And I think from a bodybuilding perspective, obviously it's pretty normal to have
Yeah. So
relatively high, but
yeah.
I'd like to know your opinion.
Yeah, so creatinine is a normal breakdown product. We measure it because it's actually it's a good marker of how well your kidney is filtering. And we use the creatinine to work out your estimated glomerular filtration rate, which is this EGFR thing here, okay? So that is the rate of filtration. So yours is perfect, your EGFR is perfectly normal despite the slightly high creatinine. Now, the more skeletal muscle you have, the higher your creatinine is going to be.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So it's interesting because you could have a 40 kilo 80-year-old lady, and her creatinine could be normal, but it could actually be high for her, if that makes sense, because it is very much. Yeah. So she might have very low muscle mass, but if her kidneys aren't functioning properly because of her low muscle mass, the creatinine is artificially normal. If that makes sense. Now, what I can do here is I can actually work out if you give me a moment, I can. So how old are you now, Jake?
24.
24. Okay. And your creatinine is 112. So yeah. So I've just double checked now, and your creatinine. We use a calculator then. Okay, it's called the MDRD GFR calculation, and it works out based on your age, an average amount of muscle mass, and what your glomerular filtration rate is based on your creatinine. I suspect that if we took into account your muscle mass, your eGFR would be even higher than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so really nothing to worry about here whatsoever. Okay.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, it's very good. Now, there's another red one here for your liver.
Go down to it. There we go.
Yeah, so what did you think about this?
Look, I think it was this one as well. Was it the muscle damage? So obviously, because I remember that I trained obviously a few days before, and I remember I looked at it, I was like, oh, bad liver's not good. Then it's related to like muscle damage from what I looked into it. So
absolutely. Yeah. So alanine transferase. Okay. So this is an enzyme which is found within the liver cell, and it's really important for a lot of the functions of the liver. Now, certainly, if there's liver damage, this can go up, but it's also found within muscle cells. So it's a non-specific marker for the liver, okay?
No.
And so we need to take that into account in conjunction with this next one down here, which is your GGT. Now the GGT, unlike the ALT, is quite specific for the liver. So when we look at these together, we can see, well, if there was acute liver inflammation, I'd expect both to be raised, okay? So the ALT being slightly high here, is almost certainly likely due to muscle damage from exercise, and it's not a concern. Okay. Other causes for this could be alcohol, could be infection, and as we're talking about athletic performance, and obviously you're a natural athlete, but we would see a high ALT and high GGT in people who use particularly oral anabolic steroids. And anti-estrogens. They tend to cause a lot of liver inflammation, so that's something that we do see quite a lot as well. Yeah, so then your protein levels, they're all very normal. Was there anything you were concerned? You mentioned in your email about the albumin, did you, or were you concerned about that?
No, I can't remember actually. I think there's a few things that were like obviously slightly on the higher and slightly on the lower end, even if they're on the green section. So I was wondering like, how much of a difference does that make if something was obviously borderline going into red? Is that usually a concern? So obviously anyone that gets a test, or is it kind of quite fine?
No, this is perfectly normal. So your protein levels you only really see low protein in people who are very malnourished. Your body's quite good at maintaining protein levels. The only reason you might see a low protein in someone or a borderline low protein in someone who is otherwise well, is if they are very well, even overhydrated. Okay, and that's just a dilutional effect then usually. But protein levels are maintained within the normal ranges and are a sign of health and nourishment really. And yours are perfectly normal. Albumin in particular is quite important because it binds testosterone. So in a moment, if we got your, so in a moment we'll come down obviously and have a look at your testosterone levels. But we've measured your total testosterone here, but there's also free testosterone. Now, because your albumin is a very reasonable level, I imagine your free testosterone is very healthy as well. So that's good. It's just getting a bit boring now, just saying how good.
I don't want to find anything bad, so
Yeah, well, I mean, we'd expect it to be good. You're you're young, you train well, and you eat well, so there shouldn't be any abnormalities really. Now the HbA1c, do you know what this is?
No, not. Yeah. I assume it's
it's
your like blood glucose kind of like levels, is it?
Yeah, but it's much better than measuring just your blood glucose,
Right.
and I love this about about MEDICHECKS is that this is a really important test to do. Uh,
Mm,
so it's glycated hemoglobin. So we talked about hemoglobin earlier. Now your red blood cell lives for about 120 days, so about 3 months. Now
okay.
over that time, it's a bit of a simplification, but over its life cycle, it absorbs sugar.
Yeah.
So we measure how much sugar it's absorbed, if that makes sense, in the red blood cell on average, okay? And that's the glycate. So we measure the amount of glycated hemoglobin,
Right.
and that gives us an idea of how your blood sugars have been controlled over 3 months. So you can't cheat this test.
Yeah. There's no
Um,
way getting around it.
yeah, no way getting around it. How is your diet and how is your so what we're measuring here is how good is your diet and how insulin sensitive are you? Um, Now, to tell you about the ranges, the upper end is 42. So
Right.
between 42 and 48, we would call that a pre-diabetic stage. Okay,
Yeah.
so that means your body's starting to struggle dealing with the sugar. Either that's because you've become insulin resistant, or that it's a dietary issue.
Mm,
And then from 48 and above, we consider that to be diabetic. So you're way off. And
yeah.
actually, I would say that anywhere between 38 and 42, although considered normal, I would flag that up, and then that would be in the green. But I would flag that up and say,
Okay.
look, you need to address this because soon you'll be pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about checking your bloods in this sense, because I think very much so. I mean, there's obviously a lot of pressures in the NHS, but if you get your bloods tested, really we're looking. When I'm in the NHS, I'm looking for disease when I do a blood.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, oh, you're not diabetic, that's okay. But when you're checking your bloods here, we're looking for health, if that makes sense. So we
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to try and optimize things as much as possible. So 31 is excellent. And to me, that says that, I mean, that is representative of someone who trains, because they've got the most, a really important organ for glucose control is skeletal muscle. So your muscle, every time you train, the muscles are ready to take up glucose, and that you're insulin sensitive, so your blood sugars are very well controlled. So that's excellent, really good. Um, and then next we've got your cholesterol profile. This is absolutely fine. We've got your total cholesterol here. We ideally want that to be less than 5, but that's a measure of your good and your bad cholesterol. The
Okay.
bad cholesterol, if you will, is this LDL and non-HDL cholesterol. So cholesterol comes in different sizes, and because they're different sizes, they're different densities. The higher the density, the healthier, the more protective it is, and the lower the density, generally the more disease causing it can be. So your LDL is very healthy, just so below 3, absolutely fine. And then we measure the total amount of low density cholesterol and very low density cholesterol, and that's your non-HDL there. That's
Right.
2.7, again, very healthy. Um, Now the HDL is really interesting. Generally speaking, it's harder to have high HDL as a bloke, because you have testosterone.
Right.
And yeah, so testosterone stimulates something called hepatic triglyceride lipase, which breaks down HDL. So, and just as another really interesting point about anabolic steroid use, that generally speaking,
Yeah.
you'll see low HDLs,
Okay.
and yours is obviously very healthy and normal. But because they've got an increase in this enzyme activity, the HDL tends to be low, even if they're consuming a lot of healthy fats in their diet. It tends to be low. It's usually
Okay.
quite a giveaway for anabolic steroid use.
Yeah. So would
Yeah,
this actually increase then if you're eating kind of more fish and more nuts sort of thing rather than
yeah. So
yeah.
definitely the healthier fats are going to increase this. So omega-3 fatty acids,
Mm.
using nuts and seeds. Yeah, using things like rapeseed oil and avocado oil will definitely help with that.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
quite interesting because recently over the past for like month or two,
yeah,
the kind of the fats in my diet because my calories been so high, I've probably slopped quite far to the bad side rather than obviously eating things like salmon and nuts, which I usually would obviously when I was in prep, or when I'm slightly more hungry.
Yeah.
So I was quite interested. Obviously, it kind of shows in this, I guess.
Well, what I would say is that you've got overall your total cholesterol is low, but you can't go wrong with trying to increase your HDL. You're only going to be able to increase it to a limit, really. But HDL, it scavenges bad cholesterol and prevents it, leading to atherosclerosis, which eventually can lead to heart disease and stroke.
Okay.
So yeah, I would always encourage doing that, but despite the fact that I think it's all relative, isn't it? Your idea of a bad diet probably isn't that bad.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, compared to some average person who's not necessarily into health and fitness much.
Yeah, definitely. So your CK, I'll pat you on the back there. You've had a good workout. That's a marker of
muscle health.
Yeah. It's a marker of it says muscle health here. Really, it's a marker of muscle breakdown. Okay, so we see this in people such as yourself who train hard, lift heavy. You're going to get a lot of muscle breakdown. And if I was to see a CK of 1,000 in someone who hadn't worked out, I might be concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. But for yourself, you've got very healthy kidney function, and there's a very clear cause of that. Then it's not a concern, really. A time to be concerned about CK would be if this can lead to, I'm sure you know, rhabdo, so rhabdomyolysis.
Right. Yeah.
So the issue of rhabdomyolysis is that it can lead to acute kidney injury. Okay. And signs of that would be very dark urine, lethargy, muscle ache. You could even have fevers or temperatures, and that would be a reason to go and see a doctor. But obviously, looking at you look very well, and considering you're a competitive bodybuilder and you would have worked out, this is absolutely normal. So no concerns there. So and then we've got your iron and ferritin here. So your iron profile, again, very good. Ferritin is a good marker of iron stores. And it's one of those things that you want optimal, more isn't more. Excessive iron in the diet can affect the liver, amongst other things. And there are obviously genetic causes of having high iron, but also we don't want it to be too low. So we do see, so the iron ranges for women are a bit different, obviously, because of menstruation. So we do sometimes see what I would call, again, low normal levels, in which case we would say, they might be passed off as normal, but we would say, hey, it might be worth considering trying to increase your iron intake.
Is that something you see relatively often in females, especially? Then is that kind of low iron?
Low normal iron stores we do see from time to time, and you're not going to really know necessarily without getting it checked, and until, of course, you develop symptoms. And the time you would develop symptoms would be because your iron stores have dropped, and you have developed your blood count has started to drop as well. So you're feeling symptoms of anemia, because your ferritin levels have dropped down. So that's why I think it's worth addressing when it's at that low normal stage.
Yeah.
So you haven't got to the point where you've developed a condition or anemia because of it. And so that's why it's so important to keep an eye on these things. Okay, so moving on to your thyroid now. Do you have a grasp about how the thyroid, how the TSH and the thyroxine interact?
I've got a relatively okay-ish idea, but obviously, probably not as in depth as what you'd think.
No, basically, so TSH stands for thyroid-stimulating hormone, and then thyroxine is the hormone released by the thyroid. So TSH is released by the pituitary gland in the brain, and it tells the thyroid gland to produce thyroxine, and it's a bit like the central heating in your house. Okay, so imagine your pituitary gland being the thermostat, sensing the temperature, and the radiators in your house being your thyroid gland, releasing heat, or in this case, releasing thyroxine. So when your thyroid gland releases thyroxine, it's sensed by the pituitary, and then the pituitary stimulates the thyroid less. Because that's how it maintains the balance. In the same way that as the temperature rises in your house, the thermostat senses it and then tells the central heating to put out less heat. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's any central heating engineers out there, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I've grossly oversimplified that. But it's a good way of thinking about it, because basically that's what we're seeing here, is that your TSH is very slightly on the higher side. So your pituitary is asking your thyroid to produce a bit more thyroxine. Now, there's a couple of things this could mean. The first thing is it could be a very transient change. Okay, maybe we've just picked this up as your pituitary is trying to stimulate your thyroid a bit more, and we do see this quite a lot in people who train very hard, bodybuilders, and it doesn't mean you've got thyroid disease whatsoever. It's an effect of, well, the training that you're doing and the hard and the dieting. Okay.
Would you tend to see it more in like a massive calorie kind of surplus when your weight's kind of pushing quite high compared to the opposite way around? Or does it
not necessarily. It tends to be more due to the intensity of the training.
Okay.
Yeah. So in your case, it's not really clear why we're seeing that. I'm not suspicious at all that you've got a thyroid disorder. What I would say though is that this is a marker that is worth repeating, and I think I probably mentioned that in your report.
Yeah.
Because it could be a sign of something called subclinical hypothyroidism. So subclinical hypothyroidism is when your TSH isn't quite at the level where we would say you've got an underactive thyroid, and your thyroid hormones are still normal, and you haven't got any symptoms of underactive thyroid. And the majority of people who have that return to having normal thyroid function afterwards, but some don't. So it's worth monitoring this, and I would recheck this in about 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's one of it's kind of just worth getting it just to find out something about like this, isn't it? Really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you noticed any issues with have you noticed any increased body fat or increased tiredness or any changes in skin or hair, anything like that?
Nothing with like hair or skin. I think it's difficult to say really, because obviously I've been pushing my calories up anyway. So I've been gaining body fat with obviously as the off season kind of progressed. And calories been high, like training's been hard. I've generally I always get slightly more tired during the off season anyway, compared to obviously when the body fat's a bit lower. So it's kind of hard to say really. I mean, I can imagine obviously if you weren't doing the process of kind of trying to build muscle, and you're kind of just living a normal person's life, then you'd probably be able to pick up on it. I haven't really noticed anything drastic in regards to that.
I mean, thyroid conditions can develop in people who in bodybuilders, and we do see it occasionally, which is why it's something worth measuring, and obviously it can be a result of the hard dieting that you do.
A lot of stress to put on your body, I guess, isn't it?
100%, but it's also, if you think about it, this is a very clever adaptive process. So imagine that we weren't in a situation where we had food easily accessible to us. If we were in periods of stress, we would want to conserve energy. So what I'm like I said, you don't have an underactive thyroid, but you can imagine that your body is going to balance how you manage your basal metabolic rate based on the environment it's in. So obviously, in particular, this is not necessarily concerning you, but the strict sort of calorie deficits that bodybuilders do put themselves through, that is an extreme state of stress, and at that point, you may notice that your core temperature is low. You're feeling a bit colder than normal, and that might be because your basal metabolic rate has dropped to compensate for the fact that you are in a state of stress.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you always hear from, bodybuilders and preppers, that they get cold, obviously they get leaner and leaner. I think obviously quite often they probably just assume it's because they've got like lower body fat, but obviously, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Maybe
multiple
none,
things.
so.
Probably is lower body fat. It's also going to be potentially something that we haven't measured here, but it could be due to reverse T3 as well. Have you heard of reverse T3?
Yeah, I've heard briefly about it.
Yes, that's really interesting. Something worth looking into as well. And certainly, reverse T3 tends to go up in calorie deficit. So T3 is another thyroid hormone, which is the sort of active version of thyroxine. And reverse T. So depending on the sort of so in a calorie deficit,
Right.
there is more reverse T3 conversion than T3, and reverse T3 is inactive basically.
Yeah.
So it's a really, I mean, fascinating anyway,
Yeah, fascinating.
adaptive process to help us survive. And that is the thing, when there are changes in our body, the thing to remember is, all of this serves a purpose, because our primary driver is to survive, and and so these are the things which happen when in state of stress.
Yeah. I think it's very much like obviously building muscle, isn't it? It's like your body adapts to, obviously the stress and stuff you're putting it under, and grows
Exactly.
accordingly. So
Exactly.
I think
And so
it's obviously
in that
definitely something
respect,
that a lot of
stress.
people, will carry on.
No, sorry. So in that respect, because stress is physiological. So physiological means it's a normal process and it serves a purpose. But stress can become pathological. It can be a disease causing. But it's a good thing in some respects. The stress that you put your muscle under is the reason that it grows. So yeah, got a bit philosophical there.
Yeah, that's good. Good to.
Okay, yeah. So, and then we finally come onto your hormones here. Again, perfectly.
Interesting stuff.
I think they're healthy. Your estradiol is very slightly raised here, which I think. So basically, two things happen to your total testosterone. Okay, so it either gets bound, okay,
Right.
to sex hormone binding globulin or to albumin, or it is, sorry, no, three things really. It's either biologically active, it's either bound, or it's aromatized. Okay, so aromatization, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, basically the difference between testosterone and estradiol is, I think, one hydroxyl group. Very similar. Amazing how different their effects are, but very similar. So there are certain places that testosterone is aromatized, i.e., it's converted to estrogen, and that is in the liver and in adipose tissue, in fat. So this may be a reflection on a slightly increased body fat on your behalf.
Right.
I don't know if that correlates at all, or.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely got an increased body fat compared to what I'm normally used to. So,
Yeah. Again, I mean, it's all relative, isn't it? You're probably still much lower body fat than I am, or most people. But yeah, so that probably reflects that. And because your testosterone is, this is a very healthy testosterone. Okay. Although the upper limit is 29, we rarely see that. We do see levels of 25 and above, and that, sometimes those are people who are on testosterone replacement. So, the high, I would call that a high normal. We rarely see that, and it's completely natural.
Yeah, I was quite interested because obviously I know during competition prep and stuff, it massively drops off, and I've heard that it can take like 6 months to kind of get back to where it was initially.
Yeah.
So what I'm planning on doing is obviously next time I compete, I'm going to kind of track the whole thing and get tests all the way through, because I'm quite interested to see how it would change from kind of start to finish. And how long it kind of takes to return. But
your total testosterone may not change that much, but your bioavailable free testosterone might. So that's why I would probably, for your, I mean, because it's one of your questions later on, we might look into, I think it might be worth doing a male hormone check next, which will look into your pituitary hormones, and it'll look into your total and unbound testosterone. because as you diet down, and your body fat drops, your estradiol will probably drop. Okay, so you've got less testosterone aromatizing. However, your levels of sex hormone binding globulin might go up. So sex hormone binding globulin binds testosterone, and it tends to go up with calorie deficit.
Mm.
And again, it makes sense, doesn't it? You know, if say you're in a state of you're in a state of stress and low calories, does your body want you to have a high amount of biologically available anabolic hormone? No. You know, it doesn't want you to put on muscle, does it? It wants you to conserve energy. If anything, put on storage. Put fat on. So that's not. So severe calorie deficits aren't, really conducive to anabolism, because of the changes in sex hormone binding globulin.
Right.
Obviously, if you're a enhanced, on performance enhancing drugs, it's a different story. Because anabolic steroids not only obviously maintain high testosterone levels, but they also have this action of blocking cortisol, which may increase and has in calorie deficit and has a catabolic action. But just people with anabolic steroids, the cortisol is blocked. So overall, I think my summary of this would be healthy. There are changes which are in keeping with high muscle mass, with heavy exercise, but otherwise, I would say it's very healthy. Yeah.
Well, good. It's good to hear. It's good to hear that I'm not going to die or anything. So
definitely not.
Yeah, I was quite happy, obviously, to see that it was most of them were in green. Obviously, the ones that kind of came up in red. And I think it's quite useful, obviously, that MEDICHECKS do kind of provide it in that format, so it's obviously nice and easy to, see.
Yeah, to eyeball it. Yeah. And in particular as well, looking into it, and you can get the graph, and I think it's very useful. So if you've had more than one test, you can track how the marker is over time.
Yeah. So
which would be really useful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's very good. So I'll probably go through it obviously separately, but obviously, as you can see, you can kind of, for those watching, you can kind of click on each of the subjects, go into each thing, and it kind of gives you an explanation of obviously, what the low and the high and stuff might mean. So you don't have to go away and kind of read on forums and Google stuff, which I think is obviously like a big issue these days when it comes to a lot of things, that people obviously just go straight online, isn't it, and just Google and look on forums without actually getting the right advice.
Yeah, the information which is on here, this has been sort of diligently looked up, and it's the best available sort of information that we have, which has got a good evidence base. So yeah.
Oh, good.
I hope anyone who's finished the whole video, hope you enjoyed that. Obviously, it's very, very different from anything I've done before. So, it needs practice, especially like the interview side of things. But I hope you guys enjoyed it nevertheless. The next video will be up very, very shortly. And that will basically go through a bit of a Q&A between the two of us, with questions that even myself, I was interested in, some of my clients and some people on Instagram were also interested in. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, if you enjoyed the video and want to see more, feel free to drop a comment down below, whatever you want to see next, and subscribe to the channel. It all makes a difference. I really appreciate it. And anyone that watched the whole video, thanks.